I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the playoff basketball podcast. I'm Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is ailing this week, but we have a very healthy Andrew Kuo here, also as usual.
No excuses, man. If I'm in the game, I'm in the game.
The Jordan flu game has felled the Jordan, but you are here hale and healthy.
That's right. I could pull like a Lillard and be like, oh, I don't feel great, but I feel fine. Like, but if something happens, remember that I don't feel great, but I feel fine.
The rich tradition in the NBA playoffs is always to discuss your injury and how it isn't an excuse or affecting you. Oh, you didn't know about my broken microphone hand? No, it's not affecting me at all. It's just a broken hand. I'm the same guy as always. I'm at peak performance, but yeah, my hand's broken and I can't hold a microphone.
If this doesn't work out in my favor, it's just like, well, it's a broken microphone hand, which is no excuse.
It's no excuse.
But if it does work out in my
fine.
favor, I am just have so much guts. I just wanted it more.
I can tell that you wanted a lot today.
I wanted a lot. I wanted as much as like Neo at the end of Matrix.
You came in with floor burns even pre-show, which is just an incredible effort on your part.
That's right. It's like as if I was playing NBA Finals Game 1 with a leather trench coat, dodging the haters and the bad takes like bullets.
Neo-Quo.
That's right.
As opposed to being a neo-conservative, we're talking about a neo-quo dodging takes.
That's right.
As they whistle over your shoulders and your arms twirl in the air, and you kind of do a
not
weird,
even grazing the leather.
Yeah, a weird limbo move as they fly ahead of you. Speaking of Keanu,
the best.
There's been like a real wave of Keanu press lately.
Well, he had that amazing appearance on Colbert, right? Where Colbert asked, like, they do an interview about, I guess, the new Bill and Ted's that's coming out. And it's kind of like heady. It's about, like, life and death. And they play themselves, him and Alex Winter. And at the end, Colbert is like, Keanu Reeves, what happens when you die? And then Keanu pauses. And I'm not getting this phrasing exactly right, but I think he says, like, what happens is those who love you most will miss you. Which was like so crazy, right? And Colbert kind of pauses, who's a deeply religious dude, goes to church every Sunday, and you hear an audible gasp from the audience, being like, "Oh, that was like super touching and sad and weird,"
We've had this moment for Keanu that I feel like has extended for several years. It's like, oh, we now recognize and love Keanu as this guy who was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and My Private Idaho and The Matrix. Stuff that was Point Break.
Speed.
That was 20 years ago.
What?
And beyond.
Yeah.
And now he is a contemporary hero, not necessarily for his movies, although they are ancillary to this, but for being like the best dude.
Is he a stat accumulator? He hasn't done anything flashy. He's taken like amazing roles. Like Speed was just going to be a blockbuster. Sandra Bullock was like on fire.
Like, is he a stat hog?
He's not a stat hog, accumulator. So like, is he Paul Millsap? Is he someone who gets into the Hall of Fame? Like, is he LaMarcus Aldridge? No, he's more loved than that.
No, he's got too many hits.
Well, LaMarcus Aldridge, how many times has he been an All-Star? Like over 4, right?
I mean, look.
Oh, you mean championships?
I don't want to debate Keanu's track record here.
Right.
He's got massive hits. Massive hits. He's got chips. Matrix, chip.
3 chips with the
Point
Matrix.
Break, chip.
Yeah. You would almost like... Yeah, okay. John Wick, chip, right? John Wick 1, sleeper chip. It came out, people were like, yo, we love Keanu Reeves. We're going to check out this new action thriller. In the vein of like Liam Neeson and Taken and all that stuff. But like the fever pitch for John Wick 2 when it came out was like pretty high. So John Wick 2 was a smash hit.
acceleration of the John Wick brand between 1 and 2 was kind of incredible.
Right.
Because I don't know that many people saw the first one in theaters, for example. They might have seen it on planes, they might have seen it on cable or pay-per-view or streaming or whatever. Not to say there weren't people who did, but it was not like a hit when it dropped.
People
it was
weren't doing podcasts about John Wick 2, even after John Wick 1. Like,
well, I'm saying John Wick 1 eventually became sort of a sleeper hit. And then 2 was highly anticipated by like you had like Bill Simmons and guys who were sort of in that, maybe they didn't see it when it first came out, but the hype had caught up. And it was like a very much like a male movie, Keanu, shoot 'em up, cartoonish thing. And everyone like really loved or was excited about the idea of this schlocky, shoot 'em up, hyper-violent movie starring beloved Keanu Reeves that was kind of also cartoonish and goofy.
And it kind of had this viral quality to it where you go out and see your friends or even meet strangers, and it would be a cool thing to say, like, I'm obsessed with John Wick. And, like, not to jump too far ahead, but, like, I'm okay with those movies. I'm not crazy about them, but I'm kind of, like, racist against hand-to-hand combat in movies because, like, sometimes I want less punching and more, like, plot, you know? And
I thought you were going to go with more, like, I don't know, gunplay, more knives, more battle axes. You just want more discussion.
I like explosions. I don't like gunplay at all.
Like that scene where you guys were fist fighting in that alley. What if you talked it out instead?
Or
like, let's mediate that conversation. Maybe you can be friends, or at least understand the other's perspective and go each other's separate ways.
Or Fredo each other. Like, oh, I trust you now. Turn around and bop. Godfather.
I mean, I used to really like gunplay in movies in the John Woo era when we loved...
Oh, come on. Is there a single John Woo movie you like? Like, really, like, in hindsight?
I mean, The Killer was a little bit boring. I liked it, and it's got the classic Wu-Tang snippets in there for obvious reasons. We all love that. Better Tomorrow, pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's see. There was The Killer, A Better Tomorrow, and then there was another one that I actually liked the best out of those.
How come his transition to America didn't work? It did work.
Not enough Keanu.
Oh, that's a very good point.
Is Face Off a forgotten classic, or did it suck?
See, I'm glad you brought up Nick Cage because I think it's a very popular thing to also say, like, I love Nick Cage movies. And I think if you watched all of them, you'd be like, whoa, half of these are real tough. But he's, like, always a joy. Like, when I'm working late at night on my computer, I'll just throw on a random Nick Cage movie on Netflix, and it's pleasurable, right? Like, it's just like, oh, yeah, he talks in a cadence and I'm really comfortable with. It's like an old buddy, you know?
But there's this interesting trajectory of those guys where we never have a nostalgia for Pacino or De Niro.
Or Travolta in Face Off.
But those guys who were really highly regarded, we don't have like, oh, we're all into Harvey Keitel now. We're really into these actors who are known as great. It's this later appreciation for them, almost in the way that we look back in basketball and we'll be like, what about Mookie Blaylock, though?
Oh, metric god, Mookie Blaylock.
You just bring up the guys like, yeah, but like Sprewell.
Yes, right.
You bring up the cult guys, the ones who at the time we kind of overlooked or were viewed as being decent but having personality, and that's kind of what these guys are. We don't sit there and say like, you remember like Kobe? You're like, yeah, we know Kobe. We know who he is. You don't need to talk about De Niro or Pacino. You already know the deal.
See, so you're saying like a Sprewell is an equivalent to Keanu Reeves?
Yeah, along those lines.
I kind of want to...
Maybe not that exact parallel, but he would be more of a character actor, a Rob Lowe, a Palinka archetype.
Well, what I meant by like a stat accumulators. Like a lot of players get into the Hall of Fame just with like legacy, a longevity, right? Like they're just excellent for a long period of time. So if their careers were half as short, they don't get in. If their careers were 4 years shorter, they don't get in. So I kind of think of like Keanu Reeves as Tyson Chandler, someone like universally beloved, defensive player of the year, and both those guys kind of get into the Hall of Fame because like they're not the flashy ones, right? Like Keanu is in flashy movies, but he's never done anything like Oscar worthy. And I think we come down really hard on like pretentiousness in our actors, and like Adrian Brody, like we just don't really like him, right?
So let's talk about that entire genre, because to me, people don't really care about John Wick 3. And I'm wondering if that moment where we had Denzel Washington, a incredibly awarded actor, a guy who is
huge,
one of the greatest actors of his generation.
Philadelphia, Malcolm X.
And we started loving him for his movies about vigilantism.
Equalizer.
And the one in Mexico, Man on Fire.
Yo, he just turned into like not only a cop, but like a bossy dude. Like for the last 10 years, all he's been doing in movies is bossing people around. Like, what's that King Kong quote? Like, King Kong ain't got nothing on me. Like, that set forth his entire next decade. Kind of like Taken One set forth the entire next decade.
Yeah, weird, right? Because in much the same way, the guys who work with Scorsese are like always typecast as just like gangsters forever.
Yeah.
It's like Denzel Washington went from being the most lauded actor of his generation to be like, actually, I'm the guy you don't fuck with.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm the guy who will shoot you. I'll kill you with my bare hands. I'll rip your lungs out.
Or I'm the down and out guy with nothing going for him. But if you test me.
But also nothing to lose.
Yes, exactly.
And I will take down your cartel on a whim.
Oh, is that a young, vulnerable person that reminds me of my daughter? Ooh, I'm going to protect her.
Your entire organization? Curtains. But I gotta think, this John Wick 3, the lack of hype around it now that it's actually out, and people seem to like it, they seem to enjoy it. I'm feeling like the vigilante genre is kind of on its last legs. And as I was saying, the ones like the Denzel Washington movies or the Taken series, it seems like it's kind of fumes for the loser, alcoholic, man with nothing to lose going out and wrecking havoc in an incredibly violent way. There's just something that's...
It's a Western, right? It's like a Western plot set in whatever time period you choose.
It'll never go away, of course. It's a Dirty Harry, it's everything, and it's an archetype. But do you
say narcotype?
Narcotype. But do you think it's losing steam?
Well, I think everything cycles out. Like to listen to directors talk about like how Star Wars became one of the biggest movies of all time, not unlike John Wick. They weren't expecting it to be the hit that it ended up being, because it was coming off the heels of so many heavy movies like Panic in Needle Park, The Godfather, all these like societal kind of narratives, about class, drugs, politics, organized crime, all this stuff, and then Star Wars comes out and they put it out. They're like, we're proud of this science fiction movie, and everyone gravitates towards it collectively, as if everyone was thinking the same thing, like finally an escape, like we get to go into outer space, and this is something about like a father-son as opposed to like what I'm doing wrong as a citizen in America, and in the 70s that kind of shifted with Star Wars, and I kind of wonder how that happens, like in the moment. Like it's easy to talk about that 10 years later, but in the moment you're just like, oh, Star Wars is an anomaly, but now we're like, oh, it was a thing. And I think you're right. Like, we might be cycling out of... I mean, Taken came out so long ago at this point. I'm ready to cycle out of this stuff, and I don't even think switching it would be that... Yeah, like, the Terminator trailer came out yesterday, right? And the lead is a woman cyborg, a woman Terminator. And, like, we're still down for that. Linda Hamilton back, like, that's awesome.
I mean, by no means am I saying that this complete trope of cinema forever, as you said, going back to Westerns throughout everything will go away. Look, Batman.
Oh, I thought you were the nightlife Batman.
I mean, I am the nightlife Batman, but there's multiple, incarnations of
Shout out to Klay Thompson, Alfred.
The Batman, as we like to call ourselves, the Batman, much like Megan the Stallion. But he was a vigilante. And in Golden State, they have their own Batman dynamic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think as we watched like kind of the end of the conference finals play out, like it was interesting like to see how the internet and people on TV were talking about Steph Curry and Klay Thompson at that point without Kevin Durant. And the logical thing for our brains to do would be to say like, oh, they're better without them. Like they're better without the guy who holds the ball. They're better without the new guy.
Let's say who's who here.
Kevin Durant is
Batman. Steph Curry.
Robin.
One of the greatest Robins in history after Kobe Bryant. And, of course, Klay Thompson, the Alfred in this trio.
That's right. And I thought you were going to have a take after that. I was like, go on.
No, what I was saying was we're now looking at a Batman-less team for the finals.
Right. And, like, it's easy to say when you take away the thing you added last. Like, you return, you like, snap back to what you were before, which was be the Splash Brothers and one of the greatest teams of regular season teams of all time that LeBron beat in the finals. And the return of Draymond Green, like, what is this? Like, it kind of feels logical when you see it play out. But in my opinion, it's just like, it's still different. Like, these aren't the same players anymore. And, like, would you rather have 3 Robins and 1 Batman?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, that's the way you do it, right?
Yes. But here's the thing about the Warriors, right? We talked a couple weeks ago about how it was a joy to see the Steph Curry that we had sort of forgotten about as KD subsumed him on that Golden State team. And seeing Steph come back in Durant's absence, seeing Draymond return as this defensive force of nature, who's arguably one of the best defenders and most versatile defenders in the history of the NBA, seeing Klay reclaiming his Alfred role as the second scoring option on that team, there's been a temptation by a lot of pundits and fans to say this team is better or more natural together without Durant. And they're still the same Warriors. And what I find interesting is that I've been screaming for a couple years about how these Warriors chips with Kevin Durant are really cheap. And I stand by that. I think that is true.
Even though you're wrong, that's fine.
I'm totally right. And they are cheap bullshit titles. They had the
Why?
best.
Because they were just good?
They had the best team and they added the best player. We don't need to relitigate that.
Weird. Too
I'm
good.
right. They were too good.
Too good.
Look, if you play pickup ball and one team is all the
If
good
you're
guys.
not touching net, what are you doing?
I'm saying if you're at the gym, one team is all the best players.
Can we vacate the Jordan years too? This is too good.
No, come on. You know this is facts. These are large facts.
Tyson Chandler was too good. Get rid of that Dirk championship.
I'm saying they don't get any credit for it. They were unearned chips.
Right. And LeBron James, too good. Cavaliers don't have a ring.
Not true.
Too good.
The only chips
He's
that are
too good though.
No.
Like they added the best player.
Quo, don't you troll me. Don't do it.
All right.
The
all right.
only chips that are vacated are all the Celtic chips from when it was Bill Russell and a bunch of all-stars in a one-team league.
Casey Jones.
There was one team in the league.
Tommy
it was them.
Heinsohn.
They played themselves. It was like inter-conference scrimmages, and they declare the winner of the champion.
Listen, you can take Tommy Heinsohn's 8 championships
Just
away from him in your own personal record book.
Like they were just playing a bunch of shoe repair salesmen.
Don't talk about Craig Elo that way.
So that yes, the Celtics championships are vacated, as are the Golden State chips with Kevin Durant. But I'm also seeing now people coming around to this opinion that I've shared, and they're like, "Well,
Who's we? Come on.
no, I'm seeing it on the internet."
But that's the most logical thing, right? Like, Go on. I'm sorry.
Here's what I'm saying. I don't even think that's true, though, about this Golden State team now. Because people are saying, wow, they rolled over Portland. They're going into the finals. They knocked off Houston. Like, KD was on this team. I'm not impressed by this Golden State team right now without KD. I think they're good. I don't think they're great. I don't know if they're a title-winning team.
The key part of that phrase is I don't know, right? Because I agree with you. There's doubts. Stomping the Trailblazers was an accomplishment, but like the Trailblazers has a really easy path to that point, to the conference finals. And no disrespect to that team, they outperformed themselves, very fun. And then by the time they ran into a very, very good Golden State Warriors team, they ran out of that magic, whatever you think that was, right?
I mean, right, it was going to be Portland or Denver or OKC or the Spurs. That was it. There was no other candidate who was going to come from that side of the bracket. And I think the Warriors probably massacre any of those teams in a fairly similar fashion.
But what do you want the Warriors to prove except beating every team in every game?
But it goes to your point. We don't know.
We don't know until they play another excellent team. And I'm excited to see the finals, but like I wouldn't necessarily feel confident if I bet against the Warriors, you know, like without Durant. I'm just saying Durant's probably.
I'm exactly on the same page here.
Right.
Where I look at this Warriors team without Durant, and I say they're good. Obviously, they're good. They have a top 5 player in Steph. They have a top 15-ish 20 player when Draymond is engaged. They have a top 50 player in Klay Thompson.
It's funny.
They have a very good team. They have two superstars, and a like excellent role player shooter.
Full disclosure to whoever's listening, you underappreciate Klay's defense, I think. You don't believe he's a good defender.
I don't even think Klay's that good of a player. I think he's a great shooter. I think he's a good scorer. I think he's an okay defender. I think he is one of the most overrated players we've ever seen, and he fits every variety of bias you can list off.
I think
Crouch bias on defense, shooting bias, points bias.
not dribble bias though.
Rings bias.
Sure, but not dribble bias.
Or does he?
I think.
Does he? Think about it.
What?
Anti-dribble bias.
The equal and opposite biases, right? Bias I.
Remember when everyone got so hyped up about the fact that he scored like 50 points with 11 dribbles?
Oh, that was fun.
Anti-dribble bias. People are giving him credit for not dribbling.
For not looking like Michael Jordan.
Hey, that was cool how you didn't have to do anything except stand in one place. Other people should be more like that. That's efficient. Get the out of here.
Meanwhile, no one has mentioned that. No one has mentioned that stat since the day after it happened. Like, I've heard no one talk about that 11 dribble thing.
Not even a stat.
I know, but like people don't. Like, it's not a part of. Like, you're bringing it up as an anti-dribble bias point, which I appreciate, but it's not even a bias because it's not. It doesn't change the way we think about him.
But people had the gall.
I'm into gall for sure.
You're a francophile.
But
people had the gall to praise him and be like, "Look how efficient that is! 11 dribbles. James Harden should be more like that." Like,
it sounds like you're getting mad at people more than Klay.
I just don't think he's that good.
Well,
I think he's good. He is JJ Redick, bigger with a little bit of defense. He is. Like, is he better than Zach LaVine? Is he, though?
I would say I can't name, without just going through lists of players, I can't name 2 guards better than him, shooting guards. I think his defense is legitimately game-changing. And we've talked about this before, and his advanced stats don't really represent necessarily like an elite guard defender, but the way he plays defense doesn't really accrue data to put into these equations.
But there are a number of different defensive metrics here, and it's difficult to measure guys' performance,
especially
via
defenders at the
metrics.
guard. Yeah.
Just in general, metrics are tough. To your point, if you're not measuring shot blocks or steals, which are not 2 departments that he excels in, it's difficult to know how good someone is. But people try.
Are you measuring like when people give up their dribble or like make the wrong pass?
Of course, but people try.
Of course, like-
there are different metrics. Defensive box plus minus, without getting too dorky, not that good. It really does reward those
But
other
good
elements.
players have good defensive box plus minuses,
Generally speaking.
Yeah.
But if you go down,
except for Westbrook.
if you go down the whole list though, like PIPM, like another one of those metrics, he's bad. If you look at RPM, another one, he's like 92nd among shooting guards. Every metric about defense says that he is not only mediocre, that he sucks. So I'm not even saying he's a bad defender. I'm just saying there is no evidence in any.
Look who's against the ropes here. It's like I'm just reading what I read, man.
No, I'm not even saying he sucks. I'm saying the numbers say he sucks. If we watch him, like, he's good on the ball, he moves well.
He changed game 4 of that Portland series by himself. In the last quarter, he altered 4 possessions, like kind of in the last 5 minutes. It was amazing to watch. Just these guards giving up their dribble on Klay. It was awesome. And it was being called out in real time. It's just like, they can't get around Klay. And then when they did, he would just block them. It was wild.
Right. By no means am I saying that he is a terrible defender.
Right.
I'm only saying that there is a weird chasm between the perception of him as a guy who made an all-defensive team and the numbers saying that he's actually really bad. That's a weird dynamic that you don't really see elsewhere. There aren't other guys who we perceive as being good defenders who are statistically like the worst on his team or one of the worst.
But you hung that point on like an all-team nomination or being on an all NBA all-team roster. And as we're seeing this week, as all these finalists are unveiled, like it's real noisy, man. Like, are we going for like this is the ultimate kind of like, well, the stats don't prove this player's better than that, but this player, like his team was more successful, and we're not even talking about supporting cast or anything. Like Joel Embiid not being on first team was kind of eye-opening, but how can you fight with Jokic? You know,
right. And look, I'm not even taking the stance of metrics being absolutism. It's just when it comes to something like defense, you're like, well, how do we measure that?
It's the hardest thing.
Like, we're watching him. We know he's a tenacious defender on the ball. We know this.
He's a perfect switcher. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Right. Like, but why is there not a corresponding impact made throughout any part of his career? Like, why is he alone the one who's somehow screwed by defensive metrics? That's the kind of thing you're like, how does that make sense? How do we
Well, I haven't done a deep dive, and just saying he's alone would be like, we haven't done our due diligence here. Like, I bet you if me and you went into our computers for 5 minutes, we can find like a list of 10 players that should have higher.
But maybe
advanced
that's what
metrics.
I'm saying is like when you look at like Marcus Smart, great defensive metrics.
Awesome.
You know, Ben Simmons, great
First
defensive
team, all
metrics.
defensive.
Patrick Beverley, really good defensive metrics. Like,
But they get steals. Those are all
Right.
steals, guys. And it's heavily weighted for steals, right?
It depends. That's what I mean. There's
You
not even
need steals,
there's
like-
not even one that says he's good.
Right.
And there's not even one that says he's mediocre.
I mean, this was our point on the show maybe a few weeks ago with Kawhi Leonard, and how Kawhi Leonard seemingly had a bad season because he didn't have like those gaudy defensive stats. Teams just weren't running plays against him. So wherever Kawhi was on the court, they would run a play in his opposite direction. And Pascal Siakam ends up being like the most improved player because he accrues so much data when they run plays on him.
And that could be happening in Golden State where teams intentionally attack Curry.
All the time.
Right. They
Yeah.
always set high
Houston.
screens to get Curry on the ball, and they avoid Klay. And that could be a reason.
And Curry got one first team, all defensive team vote, which was wild. And I'm like, what's the logic there? The best offense is the best defense? Like, but he probably got a bunch of steals, and someone's like, aha, you guys aren't seeing this, but Curry's actually a good defender. And I'm like, no, he's not.
Before we jump into the conversation about all NBA and those postseason awards, what hangs in the balance for the Warriors here in this finals?
So much. It's like, I find myself kind of, and I always bring up this thing, it's like, there's always like a sadness to the playoffs to watch all these teams like being eliminated because we spent like half the year following all the Portlands and even the Utahs and the rebuilding Celtics. And the Warriors, I think, is like, I still find them joyful. Like, I'm psyched to see them play and go do their thing. But
I'm psyched for them without Durant.
Oh, yeah, it makes it tastier.
With Durant, I would be completely unenthusiastic
He's not as
about
fun.
watching this finals coming up.
Definitely not as fun. This team without Durant is like a joy. Like, I kind of the memories are legitimate, right? I remember them being this fun, and I'm watching it again. I'm like, oh, that's right, they were fun.
And we talked about that it's so rare when you get to see the earlier version of someone that you loved because it never happens.
Yeah,
like as we said before, like Nasty Nas is back, and he was never back.
Right.
And in this case, you're like, oh, it is. Nasty Nas is actually back.
Yeah, but like in all these movies, like that image kind of crumbles before your eyes, right? Because they're looking at a lot of decisions. Durant, whatever, he might walk, but Klay is looking at a contract this summer, and then Dre next season. And the Golden State management has said they want to retain all these core guys at almost any cost. And I believe them because they're going into a new arena. They're going to have a ton of money. But this is up to the players, right? So Klay could decide that he values being his own man over Alfred. It's on the table.
For all my criticism of Klay here, he could still be leading the league in scoring or something.
I love him.
I just am not that impressed by what he does on Golden State other than being an incredibly good shooter. If you went to a different place where he, say, had to dribble more than like 10 times a game to score 30 points, I would like to see that.
Yeah.
Like Klay doing something besides just being like the beneficiary of good looks
passes,
and like running down, catching it, and shooting. I'm like, it's an awesome skill. It's basketball. Shooting is really, really important. I'm just not that impressed because to me, you're like king unitasker. I know he can play defense, sort of, and rebound a little bit, but you look at his numbers, you're like, CJ McCollum has to do more than you.
Sure, yeah, because Golden State is stacked, and like Draymond Green runs that team.
I just mean really good players who are the focus of an offense don't get to not dribble.
The reason I think Klay will be an excellent player somewhere else is because he's smart, he switches well, he's a good shooter, he doesn't commit that many turnovers, he knows where to stand when he doesn't have the ball, he's a good defender. Like, yeah, I'll take him.
But can he be the best player on your team? Can he be your...
I hate that question, but... Yes, he could.
Well, look, there are a lot of varieties of best players on teams.
And there's a lot of varieties how good teams are. Can Kemba Walker be the best player on a championship team? I don't know. I don't care, right? Like, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't even mean in terms of being a championship team. It's more like, can you run a successful offense with Klay as the focal point of it, or does he have to sort of keep this role? Can you, like, ISO Klay? Or does he have to be in the role of like off ball, spotting up, getting out of the break, looking for spot up threes?
Perhaps, but it doesn't take away his value. We kind of saw this with Kyrie Irving in Boston, right? He's like, oh, I don't want to be Robin anymore. I want to be Batman. And he's like, yeah, I'm more of a Robin kind of guy.
And Klay was like a tick above league average in terms of efficiency this year, which is not that impressive. It's like he doesn't get to the foul line. He shot 40% from three, which is great, but as we're saying, he gets a lot of open looks. I don't know. I just don't think he's this brilliant scorer that can...
Rings, baby.
You got the rings.
And I got
Chips.
that baby in.
12th consecutive show with the baby unforgotten.
Well, we say like this whole thing kind of could crumble if the Warriors aren't lucky is because Klay being a third team All NBA, missing out on the third team All NBA thing, takes him out of the Supermax, right? So you could look at it two ways. You could look at it like if he gets the Supermax and he's on the team, he stays with Golden State because they pay him. Or he's just like, well, if I can make like the same amount of money as the man in New York, like you can't pay me that much more than what I can get somewhere else. So I'm going to try it out.
Well, just to give a little background on the Supermax, essentially it was built into the last
CBA
in order to reward players for staying with the teams where they've spent most of their career. In particular, to reward superstars by giving them huge bonuses in terms of the money they can make annually.
And to reward teams for cultivating these superstars. Like you can keep them now.
Right, and there's restrictions where you can't like trade a guy and him make that money elsewhere. It's like it has to be with the team they were on when they were named to one of the 3 All-NBA teams.
And they have to be, what, 7 or 8 year veterans, perhaps?
That I'm not quite sure about because there's other contractual bumps you can get on your second contract. But for
This is some seedy business, man. This is ripe for corruption.
So, for example, Kemba Walker was named to one of the 3 All-NBA teams as a guard, and he happens to be a free agent this year.
Talk about just above average.
Kemba's awesome, but he's also now going from a guy who, if he leaves the Charlotte Hornets, he can be making $140 million over 4 years. If he stayed prior to being named to this team, he could make $189 over 5 years. I mean, that's $50 million more. That's a big incentive for him to stick around.
What, Ben? He's already rich. What's the difference of $50 million here and $50 million
50
there?
million here, $50 million there.
Can I borrow $5? Nah.
But now, with him eligible for this Supermax contract, shout to the facility where Ted Kaczynski is in Colorado, but the basketball Supermax, Kemba could now make $221 million over 5 years, which is just an astounding $81 million difference.
That's a lot of ravioli pizza, man.
That is carb on carb money.
Woo! And it's so interesting when you go into the implications of just being named to this arbitrary list, right? That we put all these kind of kickers in. And it's like, what's to stop a team from going to the media guys who vote and be like, oh, there's a 2-vote swing? Yeah, you want your credentials or not?
Or how about we'll just give you $10,000 to vote against our guy?
Exactly.
Yeah, that wouldn't be too brutal when it's exposed. But so look at the Kemba situation, right? Just as an example here. He is a fantastic player, but he's probably not a top 15 player in the league. But what does Charlotte do? You can either say, okay, we'll pay you $221 million over 5 years, which is not what you're worth.
Oh, no, they do that automatically. That's on the table today.
That's what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
they are now stuck with that option versus saying, we'll bite the bullet and pay you $189 for 5. Now you're like, we're on the hook for another fucking $32 million? Come on.
Well, this is a procedural, right? Like, Charlotte goes to him and like, well, if you want to win, you can't take that 221 because we need to buy other players. So if you want to be on a winning team, like you need to give us a break. If he says no, it'd be like, all right, we'll give you the 221. And if you're Kemba Walker, you have to consider like you can make this money up. And let's say you had Nike. I don't know who Kemba kind of works with now, but let's say you had Nike just being like, we really need you to get out of Charlotte, man. Like,
Kemba's on Jordan Brand, I believe.
I mean, that's very legitimate if they're just like, yo, it might benefit you in your like prime years to just get out of town, man. Because New York and LA have space for you.
Is Jordan Brand going to say that to a guy on the Charlotte Hornets?
That's very interesting. Yeah, maybe that's why he stays, you know? But if you're Charlotte, you have to keep him. This is a great day for you because I think isolating a superstar like Kemba Walker, it won't happen to them again for another 5, 6, 7 years.
Well, this, of course, is the dilemma that teams face when you've got a guy who's the face of your franchise. He's a star, but you might not want to pay him that much. And in Charlotte's situation, sure, maybe they want to pay him that much, but the Sacramento Kings didn't. And there's been a bit of a, not blowback, but there's been different ramifications than that were intended from the Supermax when teams say, we actually don't want to pay that guy this amount of money and he can be out, or we're going to trade him like the Kings did with Boogie Cousins. The Hornets don't have that option right now. And if Kemba was more anticipated as a typical member of these 3 teams, and they knew that they were going to be on the hook for that incredible sum of money, maybe they trade him at the deadline and pass that, and just say, okay, we don't even want to be confronted with that situation.
I mean, I would do that, and of course, I'm always interested in shedding money for space. But is that a New York thing? Because we live in such small places. I always value space too much. I have dreams of space. I'll wake up in a good mood. I'm like, oh, I dreamt I was walking through a big empty room that I had to lease for. It's just such a dream. But I think I would. So this is the crux of being an athlete, right? Kemba is up against his last big contract. If he signs it with Charlotte, he probably doesn't ever get close to fame in terms of getting deep into the finals. Charlotte also, if they sign Kemba, probably seals their fate for the next 5 years. But do you want that gate revenue? Are you going to be the team being we stuck by our man, therefore we're a place where success could happen, and we want other players to come join him, and we want our fans to come and support us because we support our team? I think Kemba should just walk, and they can villainize him.
Kemba Walker? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. Did he ever have the Luke Skywalker? I mean, the Luke Skywalker nickname belongs to the Green Hornet in New York, but was it ever...
And Kenny Skywalker. It has to be on a Nick. So
Who's
maybe
feeling better now, right?
Maybe Kemba's got to come.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what Michael Jordan does over there, because missing out on Michael Kidd-Gilchrist as such a high pick and him turning into probably a player you just let go was a big turning point, with also signing Nick Batum to that money. It just didn't work out over there.
Yeah, and looking back, there were mistakes that were made all over the place by Charlotte,
so many.
because they were in that undesirable position of having a star, having a few young players who could turn into something, and saying, okay, we got some money to spend, let's do it, and let's become a good team.
It's always Dwight Howard.
Right.
We got Dwight Howard.
But you know in your heart when you're doing that, your ceiling is not a championship.
No.
You're maybe we can become good, pretty good.
This is a
maybe
placebo.
Like
It
three
may
seed
work.
good.
Right.
It's their ceiling is the 3 seed. There's no chance of winning a title. And not to say that teams shouldn't make that decision, because being a 3 seed is cool.
And that's success, right?
Right. It qualifies as success. No one's mad. It brings excitement and enthusiasm to your fan base. People are in your arena. You're on the news. You're on national television.
Talking about you in May. It's awesome.
Yeah, you're in the playoffs. You're maybe going to the conference finals like a Portland Trailblazers. But here's the downside. We have nothing, and we've got our one star, who's a very good player, but not a mega superstar. And we're about to say the next 5 years he's going to get a third to a half of our salary cap.
And this is the longest I've ever wanted or wished we would ever talk about the Hornets, because I don't really care about that franchise that much. It seemed like a vanity project of the NBA to put a team there just because North Carolina is such a big basketball town for college, the one and done bus factory. But Kemba Walker's interesting in terms of he's caught the eye of Lakers and Knicks fans, because he's kind of the consolation prize if they don't land Kyrie. And maybe he's even better than Kyrie. But I think a lot of big market teams are hoping he opts out.
I'm a bit torn on what I want to happen with Kemba. There's a part of me, despite being pro-player and pro-free agency and the whole idea of players controlling their own destiny, that does kind of like the idea of, Kemba spent his career in one place. In theory.
Yeah, totally. Superhero stuff.
Yeah, man, that was the guy. He was the Mavericks, but for the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, the Flash runs fast. Always run fast. Don't do anything else.
But you kind of have to have a calcifying moment that makes you the face of the franchise instead of just being Mitch Richmond. And that's the problem for Kemba
Champion
here.
Mitch
that
Richmond.
You don't have to, true, but not with the Sacramento Kings.
He didn't even take the ring, I don't think.
You have to have a moment where Kemba takes his team to a promised land. And I don't see that happening in Charlotte, considering the wealth of good teams in the NBA, in the Eastern Conference, and the lack of good talent on his own team. So the other side is put him on the Lakers with LeBron, put him on the Sixers, put him on the Knicks, but put him in somewhere where we can see him on a larger stage and create some of the kind of memories that he did when he was in college. You know, we can all remember him crossing a dude or putting a dude on the ground with his fabled step back in Madison Square Garden, draining the shot. Like, Kemba's highlights are from college in our minds, in the Garden. And you're like, that's not fair. The dude is an all-NBA player, and we can't even think of that many iconic moments out of him scoring like 50 points or 60 points earlier this season.
But then we get haters like you saying,
a
like, we got to vacate those wins because all Kemba did was join LeBron and Kawhi Leonard, and that doesn't count. We don't observe that. Of course you're amazing. Go do it in Charlotte.
I will be the judge of when these titles get vacated. And if the Kemba, LeBron, Kawhi team comes together, we'll have to see if I vacate them or not.
I like the idea of NBA teams holding nothing and then holding everything for a short period of time and letting go of everything. Sort of like, it reminds me of a video game, but just like, I want 5 or 6 teams to just have all the cap space and with no obligations to any of these huge Supermax players, and just wait for a moment, be like, okay, here's our 3 years. And I know that's frowned upon, like the Marlins do that, no sin bin in baseball, but I don't believe sustained goodness is great. I believe short bursts of excellence are even better. Like, we always talk about purgatory on this show, and the Washington Wizards and the Charlotte Hornets might be entering purgatory if they sign this contract.
So you like the Orlando Magic, not the San Antonio Spurs?
Spurs are different because they've won, right? So there's like no sin bin, but they're the Yankees. The Warriors and the Spurs are like, they have the infrastructure there to be amazing. I'm talking about the Nets. I'm like, hold nothing. Like, be careful what you do with D'Angelo Russell. They might be 1 year away from getting everything, but at this point, I'm just like, stay smart, don't commit, and then when the time is right, and this summer there's a lot of free agents, when the time is right, spend big for 3 years and then have nothing again.
I mean, we're going to speculate about what happens with members of the Warriors all summer long, or at least for the month until these...
Does Dre walk?
I mean, he can't leave yet. He's not a free
I know,
agent.
next year. But they're already trying to save money for him next year. Right. He's already decided, come on.
To me, the original 3 probably don't want to leave. That's just my gut instinct.
It's too fun over there, man.
But also, that's them, and that's what they built. They built a championship team. They built a team that had the best record of all time. And if KD leaves, I think those 3 guys are like, it was us, though. There's an instinct to say, let's stick this together. We don't break up because KD left. We keep this together, and we go back to what we were, and we were champions. And we're not defined by KD deciding to go play for the Knicks.
But that's an I agree, but isn't that the ultimate projection we have as fans, being like, they're a family?
Oh, we have no idea.
Right.
No idea. We say that all the time.
Yeah.
We're always wrong about players' motivations.
How dare Jordan abandon his team for 2 years to play baseball? He would never do that. That's a family.
It's a complete projection. At the same time, they all did re-sign there. But that's also a product of the way that your first contract is set up, that you were rewarded for staying there as a restricted free agent, and it's almost impossible to leave.
Yeah,
Maybe they don't like each other at all, but I never got that feeling.
Yeah, but let's say like the family thing goes even deeper, and like, well, Dre's from Michigan, and he loves Tom Izzo still, and Izzo's still like at Warriors games. Like, maybe he wants to go back to Detroit. Maybe they're freeing up space. Him and Blake Griffin.
I don't know how good the Warriors will be without Durant. And this is why. I don't think they're a lock in any way, shape, or form to even win this finals.
Okay, but I want to press you on this.
I'm not impressed by the team that
Do you think they?
that annihilated Portland. I think Portland was a mediocre team without Nurkic.
Of course, yeah. We don't got to talk about that.
Right. And Lillard was banged up. Like, sweeping them means nothing.
Okay.
I'm looking at this team. This is not the same team that won 72 games that lost to LeBron. This is not them. Iguodala is 3 years older. Livingston is 3 years older.
Bogut's not a factor.
Bogut's not a factor. Harrison Barnes is gone. David West is gone.
Dre looks exactly the same. The greatest player, the greatest Knick of all time, Jordan Bell, looks amazing.
He's been good, max player. But in general, I'm just looking at this team and saying, this is not the Warriors that we're pretending they are.
But
we're
when
pretending that time stood still, that they were trapped in amber. KD got hurt, and all of a sudden that team that we saw demolish the league, except for LeBron and the Cavs, is back again. This is not them.
And I think that's a common feeling in the NBA. Everyone's just like, oh, it reminds us of the Splash Brothers. But it's not them. We know. Like, if they win another championship, and we're talking about all these guys of Hall of Famers, like, how surprised would you be? On a scale of 1 to 10, like 3? You'd be like, yeah, they're champions again.
What's the worst case scenario here?
The worst case scenario for me is if they lose. Because I want to kind of just take a wrecking ball to the narrative of like ring chasing and or ring accumulation. So I just want to I want to hold Kobe's 5 to task. I want to talk about Tim Duncan and how great he was. I want to take Jordan's 6 to task. Like, this brings in such a great wrinkle to it. And people are going to be like, well, the team was just better. And I'm like, well.
There are a lot of interesting angles that happen, because if they win without KD, they devalue their last 2 rings. If they lose without KD, it devalues the original team, because then they've only won 1 ring without KD and then have lost 2 finals. And all of a sudden you're like, they lost to LeBron and they will have lost this one.
Wait, I thought they had 2 rings before KD. Just one?
Just one. 2 trips to the finals.
And they have 3 total.
Right. So if they lose this time, people are going to say this is that same team. They're not going to do the justice to make the excuses that I just gave. And not the same team, man. Iguodala's old. He's banged up, etc.
We did this last episode for sure. And you're right. You're totally right about that. And it's fun to take the best team down a notch. And kind of in a broader picture, I want to take the Bulls down a notch a little bit, because people still talk about Michael Jordan. Smart people still talk about Michael Jordan in terms of well, he's untouchable, so we can't talk about him. We can talk about everyone else. As soon as we start climbing these championships, I want to be like, Steph Curry's better than Michael Jordan.
I'm with you. Chips don't matter. Who cares? Accelerationist all day in terms of the Warriors. But the injury to Durant has thrown a little ripple.
A huge ripple. I mean, it's the whole
not a little
thing.
ripple. It's a huge ripple. You're right. And it's not a pebble. It's a boulder in the placid surface of the Golden State Dynasty pond. They kind of can't win here. As I said, if they win, I mean, look, they can win. They'll win a title. But legacy-wise, people are going to make pretty convincing arguments if they win or lose. What will irritate me the most is if, it's a 2-2 series and then KD comes back. And I'll just be like, oh, come on. Give me something. Give me a hunk of meat to, rip apart and let me troll and make arguments with. If they're like, yeah, they're up 2-1 and KD comes back and then they win 4-2.
I love it. I love it.
It's so annoying.
There's
just no resolution whatsoever. Then he leaves, but Steph wins MVP. I need something annoying to happen to the Warriors, not annoying to happen to me.
I love it because, Steph and Klay have been asked about this repeatedly, and they come from NBA royalty, so they don't have the same kind of I hate to use the word chip on the shoulder, but they don't have the same motivation that a Durant does, who grew up poor and is trying to define his legacy. So shout out to Steph and Klay, who are just kind of mellow, being like, oh, Durant's our best player. We need him back. I don't care what you think about us. I don't care that he wins finals MVP all the time. He's our best player. So whatever you guys want to say, whatever. I'm just chilling on this float again, drinking Hennessy.
I like that idea. I do think one thing that the Warriors are missing here is they don't really have a mascot. Perhaps a rapper mascot. There's Little B, there's E40, but I don't see enough
Not
interaction.
not someone like an 18-year-old would recognize.
Yeah, they're older guys, which is amazing when you think of Little B, who
So
is like
old
the
now.
face of modern rap, and now you're like, oh yeah, he's archaic.
Who's Little B?
He came up with YouTube.
Yeah.
But where's the rapper who's going to show up and give Steve Kerr a shoulder rub when he needs it?
When Nick Nurse is in his moment of need, he knows he has support from Drake. The most famous thing that ever happened to Toronto. I was trying to think of famous things out of Toronto. Does poutine belong to Montreal?
Well, Toronto, although they have some French speakers there, is an English-speaking city. So I would not give them credit for poutine. I could be wrong, but to me that falls under the jurisdiction of the Quebecois.
Is there
The
beef?
Quebecois, if you will, which was more Montreal and Ottawa and those areas.
Did Drake overstep his boundaries as like a representative / fan? Like, I know he works with the team. I know he's invested. It's like the OVO training center. Like, they give him an opportunity to have a say in their jersey designs and like their creative direction.
I mean, he totally overstepped his role. Absolutely. It'd be ridiculous if Spike Lee was out there touching Mitchell Robinson. You can't have that.
I'm sure he's high-five Mitchell Robinson on the way
That's
down
fine.
the court.
High fives are fine. But in the huddle, like Spike is in there, like, yeah, feed Cornette.
I mean, so Drake, in a tense moment, gave kind of Nick Nurse like a pinch, a double-handed pinch on the shoulders. Nick Nurse claims like he didn't even know it happened because there was a lot of people who said like as a fan, he should stay in his lane. Like Coach Bud was just like, what are we doing here if a fan can just walk up and touch a coach? That sets a really bad precedent. We get angry at fans for doing all sorts of stuff. What is Drake? Is Drake a coach or not? You know, and
To be fair, Coach Bud was asked repeatedly about it and kind of was like, yeah,
sure.
well, I don't even know what his deal is, and was sort of like, well, yeah, if he's a fan, then
he's got no rappers in Milwaukee.
Cuckoo Cal. But Coach Bud didn't really, like, drag Drake. Like,
No, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't roast him. He was just more like,
And Drake kind of get a pass from Nick Nurse as well. Like, it's all good, right?
but I think it comes down to what you're saying. Is he an employee? If he's an employee, then okay, you can have who's in your huddle. It's actually fine.
Yeah.
If he is paid by the organization, if he's on payroll, then sure. But then put him on the bench with the players and don't have him in the front row.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have memories of Squatch, like, interacting with the coach in the game in Seattle. You know, like, mascots.
Hasn't Mark Cuban interacted with players and refs and stuff on the
He's the
sideline?
owner. He's the clear-cut
Right, but
owner.
isn't that the same kind of
For sure.
delineation? Because even if you're an owner, if you're on payroll or you're paying people, you're in the stands, like he's not a typical fan.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we're talking about is like it's kind of jarring to see that wall broken, right? Because when we watch or at the game, if we're lucky enough to be in the arena or on TV, like it seems like there's two things happening. The fans are reacting to something that's happening on the court, and what's happening on the court is like whatever simulation, and the fans kind of in a WWF way kind of react to that, like no, that was a charge, even though it was clearly a foul. You know, like we have signifiers of how to act as fans, and that's been debated a lot this year, especially in Utah. But I think to see Drake do that, we're just like, wait, whoa, where does this wall exist? Like you're interrupting
It
the
didn't
story.
even occur to me really when I was watching it. It was only after people voiced their mild outrage, not real outrage.
It occurred to me in a cool way. I'm sorry. I wasn't outraged. It occurred to me that he shouldn't be doing that, but I'm like, I'm cool if he does. And like, we've come so far from the Malice in the Palace, right? And like, when that happened, I remember I remember where I was when that happened, in my living room watching TV, and weird, just
Also,
really weird.
the same place that I was when I watched 99% of basketball games over
When
the last decade and a half.
When Drake gave Nick Nurse his back rub, I knew where I was, on my couch watching a game. But when the Malice thing came, like when the footage came out, it was shocking. I was like, whoa, this is a real breakdown of societal kind of boundaries if you consider like that relationship like a mini society, you know? And players are going into the stands. If we're kind of little being everybody, just really quickly, Malice in the Palace was a game between the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons. In Detroit, Ron Artest, New York City great, was teed up. Someone threw a cup at him. He took that to great defense, went into the crowd and started throwing haymakers, and his teammates protected him. Steven Jackson went up into the crowd with him. Jermaine O'Neal was protecting himself versus fans that had walked on the court to square up against him. Luckily, he slipped on some water and missed ending someone's life. But it was jarring. It felt like a Royal Rumble. It looked like a Royal Rumble.
The NBA has had an interesting, to say the least, relationship between its talent and the people who pay to sit in the stands for a long time. And if you go back to like the 70s and 80s, there was an idea that the NBA was a league full of guys on drugs. You can look at articles from the crack era in America, in the New York Times, in Sports Illustrated, where there was a pronounced fear and perception that 40% of the guys in the NBA were freebasing cocaine. I mean, those are numbers that were like mentioned in the article, or estimations from guys in the league that like everyone's just doing coke. And it tied into hysteria about drugs that was 100% tied to stereotypes and white fear. And it was during...
Manufactured by like the government, like not to get too weird about it, but it was like the war on drugs, you know?
You can tie it into Ronald Reagan talking about young bucks buying T-bone steaks and welfare queens. I mean, it was dog whistle repeatedly. Dog. It was a kennel for dog whistles. But the NBA has had a few moments like this where the dress code came after the Malice in the Palace and was certainly tied to this idea that, okay, we embraced rap music, we embraced the, quote, inner city.
We want to protect our fans who might be appalled by this behavior.
Right. They embraced the marketing of Allen Iverson and what hip-hop did to make the NBA cool. But all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, have we overstepped this in a way that
is alienating our money? It's affecting our bottom line.
That,
right?
like, racist airport uncles in their, dad shoes.
Larry Bird would have showed him what's what.
And honestly, when you see people who say, I prefer college basketball, you get a side eye.
Yeah.
What do you like? What do you like about it? You like the inferior caliber play? Yeah. Is that what you like so much? You like the fact that they don't get paid? Like, what do you like so much about college basketball? Like, there's something there that, the traveling, they call it more travels. That's what you enjoy. You're a travel guy. Like, there's something about college ball that.
Shout out to the Fab Five who kind of started altering that dynamic just by the way they dressed.
Absolutely. But getting back to the point about the Malice in the Palace, and, when we talk about Drake, there are certain rules in place about fighting, for example, that are really draconian. Where in hockey, this is all cliche shit for anybody. Like, I'm not breaking any, news. There's no news flash here. That hockey players and baseball players, football players, everybody fights all the time. But in the NBA, if you punch someone, you're suspended for like a week and a half.
If you take a step off the bench with intent to maybe fight, you're suspended, which ended a Knicks championship run. And that I'm not mad about at all.
And it's the only sport that has that kind of rules, and it's clearly due to the racial demographics of the fan base.
You need to keep these players in line to protect the fans from these unruly 7-foot.
I mean, how many times do you see sports pundits? Oh, the inmates are running the asylum, and you're like, bro.
Yeah, and we're aging out of that, thankfully. I think like they got rid of the dress code, and I think we're in like peak NBA joy because PJ Tucker could roll in with the swagger he does, and it gives another wrinkle into this league. And I think the switch from Stern to Silver was a big deal. I think Silver's kind of a more modern thinker, but you're right. It's like this is an odd thought I always have. It's like certain drugs really influence rap music, like crack and was like a fast-paced Wu-Tang Clan kind of beats per minute kind of thing. And then you get into the southern stuff, which is like syrup, and you have a totally different feel to the musical community down there. And then marijuana in the West Coast, totally different sounds, but they seem to be on the same page. And I love that. I think it's really interesting. And I want to almost equate that to the way the NBA is played. Like you're right. In the NBA started in 1996, the year Allen Iverson was drafted.
Before that,
no coincidence.
I don't even know what was actually occurring in the league.
It was jazzy. People were throwing up shots. One with 1 foot.
It was more of an interpretive dance, as far as that included a rubber orange orb.
It was a ballet with 2 nets. But in the era of the 90s, I was thinking about the KG team quite a bit and Terrell Brandon, and like that was such a different visual way. Even Mookie Blaylock we mentioned today, like it was such a different kind of style of play. The way they dribbled, the way they moved, the way they kind of like celebrated after a dunk or a shot, and the whole thing kind of changes with music. And I think like now it doesn't look the same because the tenor of the world in America is different, and we no longer talk about crack cocaine as a problem, and we kind of celebrate marijuana now as a thing.
What's kind of wild is that I saw recently the Momofuku got rid of the name Crack Pie.
Yes, shout out to Christina Tosi.
It was Crack Pie, right? Mm-hmm. And that had been the name for ages, and it was something that was very much associated with that restaurant and that bakery as this incredibly sweet, obviously addictive is the adjective that they're associating with crack cocaine, but they got rid of it.
Yeah, and the explanation was pretty seamless. They were just like, oh, this is outdated, and this is our hit. Please come by to try I think they renamed it just the name of the shop,
Yeah, and they said that they'd been getting heat for it, which I don't necessarily believe. Like, how many people
I saw it.
But how much
Right.
were people really talking about the crack pie from Momofuku in 2019? But there was probably enough that it warranted them changing the name to something that was more sensitive.
Yeah.
But I was a little like,
Yeah.
were you really absorbing a lot of body blows about the name of that thing? Or is
Yeah.
this just like, okay, we'll change it, send out the press release.
I know what you
It's
mean,
cool.
because like crack is a thing that existed. Like it was a thing that you could look up on Wikipedia with a definition. It was an addictive, cheap drug that kind of took over New York City for 10 years. And that itself is a really loaded kind of story arc, but it is a thing. So like I'm okay with them changing it because like reading the room is
For sure, and to say we're going to name a fairly expensive slice of yuppie pastry after something that
yes.
decimated the black community, the poor
People are still in
across
jail
America.
because of that thing.
You might want to change the name.
Yeah, totally. But like we're not angry at them, and yeah, I mean, bringing it back to basketball, it's interesting because
I mean, I'm not saying free speech. Call your shit the crack pie. I'm like no. But I don't know that it was under a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah.
But to your point, okay, read the room.
yeah, and it's interesting. Like so, your process legend Rashawn Holmes this week was caught with a lit joint in his car, and it was kind of confusing because in a lot of states, like smoking marijuana is not believed to be as like it's not a stigma it used to be.
In some states, it's legal.
Yes, and but we still have to report it because it's still framed as like he got caught doing something bad, And even your boy D'Angelo Russell getting caught. I mean, D'Angelo Russell's biggest crime was he thought he could bring an Arizona can onto a plane.
Yeah,
Like, what universe?
What are you doing, man?
Yeah, you can't. You got to chuck that thing, and your weeds in that thing,
But
man.
like, you can't bring cans of stuff anyway, unless it was
He's like, it's just iced tea, and they're like, sir.
like, we don't care about the weed. You can't bring the iced tea on the plane, dog. Yeah, like the weed's fine. Can you just put the weed in a non-metallic container?
Yeah, and OJ Mayo is serving like 2 years for abusing drugs. We've heard Lamar Odom's trials and tribulations. One of the most interesting guys, like in America, I think, Lamar Odom. Him talking about, I think he had the quote recently where it's just like, "Oh, God gave me my life back, but He took away my ability to do the thing I love, which is play basketball." And he's like, "I'll take that trade."
True. It's also that you're old.
Yes, you're also washed.
Why did God make me 40 years old?
Yeah. But what was that player that got suspended? Tyreke Evans.
Right. So Tyreke Evans, who spent this last year on the Indiana Pacers,
Free agent.
After being a bit of a journeyman, he played in Memphis. He'd played in Sacramento.
Pelicans Rookie of the Year, I believe.
Or
No, Sacramento.
Yeah. And then he was on the Pelicans for a bit. Talented player at this point. He started a few games for them. Just a rotational NBA player.
Was absolutely going to get a deal this summer with somebody.
Without question. He did not play well this season, but was good last year. But he recently was, and I forget the exact words they used, but it was more along the lines of like disqualified and like disbarred, whatever it was, from the NBA for 2 seasons because he violated the CBA's substance abuse policy. There's a list of drugs which he tested positive for.
A wide spectrum of drugs.
Right. It's not specific saying which one it was, but it falls into a category that includes more of your kind of Schedule A drugs. It was like cocaine, LSD, codeine, heroin, some opiates. I forget what else is in there. The big dogs of the narcotic trade.
Sure.
I don't know which one it was. They didn't say.
And we'll never know, probably.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I doubt it was LSD.
But it kind of matters, right? Like the difference.
It definitely matters.
The difference between coke and heroin is huge.
Like, was he drinking lean?
Yeah.
Like, what if it was that?
Yeah.
Are
we saving his life or are we punishing him? Like, what are we doing here?
So here's the thing. This kind of goes back to the discussion we had a little while ago, as in minutes ago, about the NBA having this perception that it was a league of drug users. And they've cooled out on the marijuana side because it's societally acceptable.
Yeah, we're done.
It's not a big deal. Yeah. We're not freaking out about guys smoking weed. No. It's like a punchline.
It might be helpful.
No one cares. If I ran a team, I want my entire squad in the hotel smoking weed. I don't want them drinking. I don't want them running the streets. I don't want them in the club. I want them in the hotel playing video games, smoking weed, and then going to bed.
Yeah.
Order seamless. Like, it's cool.
Watch for that pizza though. Ooh, the pizza's good.
But yeah, I don't want them. I don't want them in the club. I don't want them getting attacked by the NYPD and their legs broken.
Are you using marijuana as a trap?
I'm saying it's a gateway drug to great behavior.
You're imprisoning them in the cell of team chemistry.
Hell yeah! I want them sitting around giggling, being kind of high.
He's a real locker room guy.
Eating some chips.
Yeah.
Playing PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds. Like that's where I want my players doing.
How did Odom get away with doing all those drugs, like around so many trainers and doctors? Like he was always known as a guy who ate a ton of candy, and he was like, "Oh, Odom."
Which at this point is sort of like a tell, right?
Super dark, right? That's a heroin thing or something close to heroin, but you crave sugar, right? And I mean, Ron Artest saying getting wasted in the locker room at halftime, like that's shocking to me too.
Odom also used a prosthetic penis.
Oh, double dick, right? Yeah, he said to trick a drug test.
Right, so you have like a fake dick and you have a pouch of someone else's clean urine.
It's very Total Recall.
Well, it's because there's like witnesses for those things. So you go into the urinal and you like, or whatever, you're giving them your urine sample, however it works. But so you're kind of pulling out a fake dick, peeing, using a fake bladder, and then handing them your clean urine.
And then Draymond Green rushes in the room and punches it.
That's why you have prosthetic balls that Draymond Green then uses as a little,
Doesn't hurt.
uses as a speed bag.
But who manufactures these drug test beating appendages? Like, what do you market it as? Just being like, oh, it's a fun toy.
Yeah, I wonder if you just get them from like head shops. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, get a bong, and then you want one of these, some weird euphemism for them, like a plastic funnel.
Yeah. A water gun.
It comes with a water pouch that fits hidden into your thigh.
Yeah. But that Odom story is wild. I remember going to the Kanye a fashion show at the Garden, and that was his first appearance with the Kardashians after he survives miraculously that whole ordeal.
Insane, like, I think he was comatose after an OD.
Black stuff was coming out of his face. They thought he was just dead.
It's like the X-Files, except it happened at a bordello in Las Vegas.
To the best Laker on that championship team that Kobe Bryant usually is attached to like a backpack. But for some reason, the backpack was off in that brothel, and he needed support then.
Batman needed Robin.
Yeah, Kobe jumped off and raced out of there. But I think that, like, and I love this take, but, like, the Kardashians saved his life, kind of, because he was sad about the Kardashians, and then they scooped him up and nursed him back to health. And I remember him coming out with Kanye at MSG, and it was so surreal because at the time, huge Kanye fan. Pablo, great album. It was for that album release. Young Thug was in the fashion show. It was like amazing. And it was Odom, I think he was in fur, but he came out kind of like wobbly. But it was Madison Square Garden. And his, like, as a basketball fan, that irony wasn't lost on me. I was just like, whoa, what a strange turn. Because I remember seeing him play in Providence where I went to college, and he was like a lefty magician, man. Like, he could do it all. And to see him come all this way, I don't know. That's just personal memory stuff. But
well, when you're, sorry to cut you off, but the Lamar Odom thing definitely resonates with me because when you're growing up and your athleticism sort of coincides with what you're watching in basketball, the guys that you compare yourself to changes. So, you know, you always want to play like AI. And then you're like, well, I'm not quick enough to be AI. I'm too tall in the circle of guys that I play basketball with to be the AI. That's not who I am. And Lamar Odom was one of those guys that I always looked at like, maybe I can play like Lamar Odom.
Oh, those scoop passes, those like, pretty little
exactly.
finger rolls.
Maybe I can be kind of tall. I like going left a lot. I can pass. I can shoot a bit.
Screen two guys at one time.
Right. Kind of run some point, but then go out and like guard a big guy and be sort of a versatile player without being the best scorer or ball handler or defender. Kind of, he was
just rolling to the.
He was the hero for the jack of all trades, master of none, which is more or less how you could say my peak basketball was like, I wasn't really good at anything in particular, but I could pretend I was Lamar Odom by making like a fancy pass or like getting a rebound.
He's the ultimate YMCA god, right? Because he has an old man game. He's always had an old man game. He's never like a thunderous kind of like athletic player. His size is a huge advantage, but he's kind of like a wily, like, how did Odom get there? It was like, who made that pass to the pass? It was Odom. Like, he's the YMCA god, right?
Yeah, and now I'm just trying to be like Troy Murphy, or at best a Joe Ingles. As I said, you're.
Oh, come on, you're no Ingles. Ingles is nasty. Second best player on the Jazz.
True, but yes, the paradigm that you're aspiring to shifts dramatically as you age.
I imagine you is more like in a YMCA context is like Clarence Weatherspoon.
I wish. He could
like
he could thunderously dunk.
Oh, right. Well, I like Baby Barkley. I think of like that was his nickname, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely not that good.
But I imagine you as like a power forward. Well, Weatherspoon didn't pass that much. I take that back.
No, I'm just a poor man's Joe. I'm just a poor man's Joe Ingles.
Very poor.
like broke Joe Ingles.
But back to the Malice in the Palace thing, it's like, right. It's like, it's weird how our perceptions change over our basketball lifetimes. And when the Malice in the Palace happened, it was shocking, truly shocking. Now we talk about it. Thank goodness no one got hurt. No one actually connected with any punch. There were suspensions. Those guys ended up playing more. The only tragedy was we never got to see that Pacers team, really good Pacers team, in effect.
And now it's a cherished NBA memory.
Oh my God!
Remember the Malice in the Palace? That was sick.
We smile about it, and we have oral histories about it online, and we're just like, oh my God. I think a famous line was, Artest and Steven Jackson were sitting together when it all ended, and I think Jackson turns to Artest like, "You think we're gonna get in trouble?" But it's weird how our perceptions changed about like marijuana and stuff, and how back in that era it would be like, "Oh, he's a bad seed. He's got caught smoking." Damon Stoudemire, right? But the whole Jailblazers team, it's like they smoke weed.
But what I'm looking at is, to me, a 2-year suspension for Tyreke Evans sounds a lot like a vestigial remnant of an era when drugs were particularly feared for not only their actual danger to players, but also the perception of the NBA.
It's a vibe thing.
And look, Tyreke Evans has missed a lot of games. He's been known as injury prone. I'm not making any exact accusations here.
Well, it sounds like you're about to.
Well, what I'm wondering is, did he test positive for this same drug in the past, and they wanted him to get help? They wanted him to kick the habit, and this 2 years is the result of prior suspensions that were not publicly divulged. Right. I don't know this.
Well, no, yeah, CBA protects that.
But if you look back, he missed a lot of time and was known as an injury-prone player. Maybe those potentially were positive tests for the same drug, and this is basically the end result of him continuing to test positive. That may be the case. That said, I do think 2 years is crazy.
It's taking a lot of money away from him. But it's interesting how Tyreke Evans, Chris Anderson, and OJ Mayo, all three players who have had this penalty put on them, and I don't know if this is a CBA thing, like, to your point, they don't seem to be arguing or appealing or anything. It might be like, yo, this is the third time we've caught you with this thing, like, do you need help? And they're just like, yeah, I know I broke that rule. The second time you told me, the next time would be it, like 3 strikes, whatever. But
it kind of goes back to what you were saying about what drug is it. It matters. If Tyreke Evans is like, dude, I just really like Coke, and I put that ahead of everything else.
Yeah.
Like, I know it jeopardizes me making $12 million a year, but I just love Coke, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I got to blast some rails, and I'm going to try to get away with it, and they periodically catch me. I'll deal with it when they do.
Yeah.
But I got to get back on that bag.
Yeah.
Like, maybe? Yeah. Or is it like, no, he is a real problem, and the NBA is done with him?
Yeah.
Because you can't make an argument that's saying you are not allowed to work, essentially, in the United States for 2 years, and we're going to take $20 million away from you, is good for him.
Yeah, and this 3 strikes...
That sucks for him. It's not good for him.
The 3 strikes policy is an awful policy that the government had, and it's just... I wonder if the league is better served by being like, hey, Tyreke Evans has violated this rule, and he's ineligible to play for 2 years, but he's still part of the NBA, and as like a veteran player, like he's now in our program.
But what about just saying, we're going to publicize this, and it's going to be 6 months, instead of potentially it being a secret thing, and then they just drop this hammer on you? It's just 2 years just seems freaking crazy for me.
But the alternate point is people get fired from their jobs all the time. He got fired from the NBA.
True. I get it. And a lot of employers have drug tests. That's certainly not a unique thing, but he's not a spy. He's not a pilot. He plays basketball.
And
basketball is something you can do on drugs. Like, it's not a big deal. It's basketball.
And this
so
is
it's really about the PR side of it. They don't want to be known as a league that has a dude like Tyreke who just won't stop doing acid. Like, he's just doing acid day in and day out.
And I think that's where we fail this whole thing. It's like, let's say he did cocaine. I mean, we'll never know, but the NBA is like, and I think the fan reaction would be like, oh, he's just out of control and it's just like kind of like a bad dude. And I think a lot of people would say the same if he was on heroin, but I think a lot of other people would be like, oh, he needs help. Like, now we're talking about a young man's life, right? And it's so fucked up because the worse it gets, the more empathy we have.
But there's also this disconnect, right, between the kind of people who are talking about sports and work in sports media and us and the people that we're around. And we know people who've died of overdoses. We're certainly...
Way too many, man.
Right. We're certainly not. We know people who have drug problems now.
Right. So the sympathy doesn't apply to everybody.
We're not... Exactly. We're not viewing Tyreke Evans as like a monster. We're also not viewing the drugs he's doing as something that makes him, I don't know, a persona non grata for 2 years, despite the fact that we know well the ramifications that can happen from abusing some of the substances on
Lamar
that
Odom.
list.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's weird when people were just looking at that list and like, this is some scary stuff. I'm like, some of it is. Some of it's not scary at all.
Yeah.
Some of it also depends on how much he's using it.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, I don't know. I have a lot of sympathy for Tyreke getting a 2-year suspension. That just sounds draconian to me. But again, we don't really know what happened in the past. Because if you look at his season-by-season record, there's a lot of voids in that game log.
And he can pull an OJ and go to overseas and try to make some money there and then come back in 2 years like Chris Anderson and win a championship.
Well, all Birdmen are cool.
All of them.
Well, it's the finals cookies.
It's the finals cookies.
I'm excited for it.
Let's hope for a fun series. Looking for the Splash Bros to bring me back to my roaring youth.
I'm just excited for the Warriors' legacy to finally be in the tatters that it deserves to be in.
Oh yeah, that'll happen. People will be like, they're erased. What Warriors team?
The Warriors are canceled. Cookies.
Cookies.